Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Be Heard Women Empowering Women. Very excited about my guest today, Jennifer Arthurton. And Jennifer is the founder and creator of Old Chicks Know Shit podcast, which I love. That's what drew me to her. And that podcast is designed to inspire and support midlife women or older, chasing their dreams and creating their next kick ass chapter. And I love that because I started a new career at 72 years old. So I really relate to this. Jennifer, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks so much for having me. So I'm the founder and creator of Old Chicks Know Shit, which is a community, a podcast, a platform, which is all about just reminding us as older women that we are not our faces, our bodies, our wrinkles, or gray hair. We are so much more powerful than we even realize, and that we have the power to basically do whatever it is that we want to do, whether it's a new career, a physical challenge, a personal challenge, whatever it is we can dream of, we can do it.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I've gone through quite a bit of things myself. And my first book, Raised by Wolves, Trapped by Demons, the wolves were my parents and the demons were my men in my life. I wrote that because of being isolated 2020 with a husband with stage 3 Parkinson's. So it was sort of therapy to
Wow.
do that. And that blossomed into two more books and a podcast. So, I totally relate to you.
Well done.
Yeah, you're cutting out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Old Chicks.
Yeah.
Old Chicks really came out of my own reinvention journey at the age of 50 when I found myself divorced, unemployed, an empty nester, and also bedridden with a stress-related illness. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of, all of the identities of who I thought I was in the world were stripped away from me. And, I was faced with this daunting task of reinventing myself and my life. And the scariest part is without all the titles and roles that I played, I had no idea who I was. And that began the journey, which led to Old Chicks Know Shit.
And what you just said about you didn't know who you were. I did not want to become my ID to be just a caregiver. And a lot of times when you have a partner with a progressive illness, that's what happens. So with me, thank God I'm very good with the computer, and I was able to find this outlet. And even if it's an hour, whatever it is, I can live in the bedroom. I'm right there if he needs me. And yet I have my own thing, which is important. And Jennifer, why do you think that like midlife is actually the most powerful point in someone's life?
I love this question so much because it's so near and dear to my heart, in that first of all, we as women are at this point of our lives, we have so much knowledge and wisdom and life experience to share. And what happens to us earlier in our lives is we get so consumed with taking care of everyone and everything that we have no energy left for ourselves or what's important to us. And so when we reach this part of our lives where, maybe our kids are leaving home, career might be on autopilot, relationships are shifting, all of a sudden it's like we come into this place where we have more time for ourselves. And when we can start redirecting our energy from all of the things that took up all of our time and start redirecting it towards ourselves and what's important to us, there literally is no stopping us. I mean, there is nothing more powerful than a midlife woman with a mission.
And it takes courage. Right? What gave you the courage to step out of those normal ID roles that you had? What got you to motivated you to do that?
Well, first of all, on my journey, I threw myself a big old pity party. Like, let's get that out of the way, probably for a little bit longer than I would have liked, right? But I did the woe is me, what's wrong with me, all of this. And then at one point I woke up one day and I thought, this is actually a gift. This is actually an opportunity for me to rebuild life on my terms. Because quite frankly, the way that I had been living was not working for me. Here I was, right? So I get to decide now what it is that I want. And yes, it was a very scary time, because I'm like, first of all, I don't know who I am and I don't know what I want. And given that I was, pretty much bedridden, so I was forced to be still. I had no choice but to go inwards. And I really did like a big, deep dive into myself, like within myself, to hear what kind of my inner voice was saying, like, what did I want? And when, I knew there had to be more, there was this little voice that kept saying to me, there's more for you.
Yes.
And I just decided, well, because I really had no other choice, that I was just going to follow that inner nudge and see where it took me.
Yeah.
And then it was just a process of taking small steps along the way.
Do you feel comfortable sharing what the stress-related illness was? Because I sort of have similar stuff. If you don't, it's okay.
Yeah.
The depression?
Yeah, no, I am happy to share it.
Okay.
No. So what happened was, so I had a very, very busy corporate job. I was traveling a lot. I was kind of giving my all to my job, giving my all to my family, and I was not making any time for myself. Like, I was pushing myself really, really hard. And it got to a place where my body was like, I stopped sleeping. So I would sleep 2 or 3 hours a day, and I was running on adrenaline. And then my body I started to crash. I was getting all kinds of pains. I was having migraines. I was having injuries, all of these things. And then that's when this little voice inside me was like, okay, there's something seriously wrong here. You got to stop.
Yeah.
And it turned out I had like adrenal fatigue and just basically burnt out. I was completely burnt out. So I had to kind of recollect myself.
Yeah, I can understand that. In my book, I talk about that the first 40 years of my life, I had no compass because my parents just gave me nothing for support. My core beliefs were not good, and you get them from your parents.
Right.
So I did not feel valuable
Right.
or lovable, etc. Like a lot of women that get into abusive relationships. So for 40 years, well, the first 20, I was a good little girl. But then after that, it was like bad marriages, alcoholism, just all these things until I was 40. But even when I got sober, it still wasn't enough. I had to dig down deep. So,
Yeah.
And I was 40, and okay, I went away. I went away 3 times. Once for alcoholism, once for food addiction, because when you give up one addiction, you usually pick up another, right? And then the last time was for family of origin issues, which was wonderful. It's a Caron Foundation in Warren, Pennsylvania. And it was really good because they did role play. And that brought a lot out of me. And I did therapy, straight 9 years of therapy. And I did inpatient, I did outpatient, I did group, I did whatever. And I was good. I was good for 30 years. 30 years. I was wonderful. But then life gives you something else to deal with. And like I said, with 2020 and my husband being in stage 3, my depression came back because I found out that the alcohol, actually, I was self-medicating because they told me you have chronic depression. They did blood tests and everything. You have chronic depression and chronic anxiety disorder, and you have been self-medicating with alcohol and pills. So when the depression came back, I knew it because I was being very mean to my husband. Thank the Lord or the goddess, the universe, that I had self-awareness to know that and get help. So I'm back in therapy, and they adjusted my medications. Nice. So I understand that whole thing about stress can trigger things in your body that have been dormant, let's say. Okay? And with you, you had your adrenaline. Too much of
adrenaline.
And
it's true. Yeah, it's so true because especially as women, we are cultured to see our value in like what we do for other people, right? And, you know, that our bodies need to look a certain way. And, you know, even like building a career, you know, as a woman, right? There was always this like need to prove myself. So I came from this energy of needing to prove, right? To prove that I was good enough, like to prove that I was smart enough. And all of that needing to prove energy, as you know, is it's a hard energy to keep up because, you know, it takes a lot out of you. And that's, you know, when I got burnt out is when I first had to come to terms with, okay, you have some work to do here, because if you want your life to be different, you have to show up differently in it. And so that began, you know, a big journey of self-exploration and personal development and spiritual development as well, too.
And like stress-related diseases, stress can cause so much disease. I don't think people realize. At first, they were telling me fibromyalgia.
No.
Then they said Sjogren's syndrome, which is, I won't go into it, but it affects all parts of your body that produce liquid, saliva, your eyes. And then I got breast cancer. And I had a double mastectomy, and they put in implants, and I had problems with the implants. And finally, after 4 years of surgery and emergencies, I said, take them out, make me like a 10-year-old boy. I don't care. I don't need them, you know? And then my stomach, I had an infection, and they ended up taking out 85% of my stomach. That's a lot of trauma to my body. Okay, and add in the abuse. Yeah, and the abuse from the ex-husband's physical. So I'm a miracle. I am a freaking miracle.
You are. Yes,
I just keep going.
You are. That's incredible.
Yeah. So a lot of that, I think a lot of that was caused by stress, was my point. All those illnesses.
100%.
You agree?
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Let's see. You got unstuck. Tell me about your community and your podcast.
So yeah, you know, so many, you know, I do a lot of speaking, and every time I do a speaking gig, women will come up to me and say, you know, the same thing. Like, I know there has to be something more for my life. I know I want something different. I don't want to continue, you know, living the way I have for the last 40 years, but I have no idea how to figure out what or even how to get there. And so the community and the podcast are really all about taking us like, so this is the other thing. As women, we are last on our lists. We are at the very, very bottom of our own list. We take care of everyone and everything before we get to ourselves. And really the community is about reminding us to connect back in and hear our own voices, because the answer to the question, what's next, or, you know, what do I want from my life, will not come from outside of us. And we've been conditioned to believe that the answers to everything are outside of us. And so learning to connect back in and hear our own inner voice, and then, you know, find the courage to follow it. That's really what it is that I do. And, you know, it's not rocket science. It just takes awareness and practice. And it's with, like, every one of us has everything we need inside us to create a life that we truly, truly love. And all we need to do is to just, you know, tune in, listen to what that is, like, what is going to make me happy. And it's what I call following the crumbs of joy. Yes. Right. So when I was at my sickest and I literally couldn't even go for a walk, I would go across the street to the park near my house, and I would sit under a tree, and I would literally just sit there and say to myself, what would make you happy right now? On some days, it would be something like, I'd like to eat an orange. Right. Okay. If that's what's going to make me happy and bring me joy in that moment, then that's what I did. That actually led to, you know, me writing, right? And I had never really written anything before, but this voice came to me and said, you should write this. And so I started writing, which led to the blog, which led to the podcast, which led to the community, right? So it was literally following those inner nudges and instinct. And then, you know, sometimes, you know, the inner nudge of the instinct sounds so big and scary where you're like, I can't do that. Like, wow. I mean, like, I'm not equipped to do that. I'm not a writer. I'm not this, I'm not that. And when we realize that, you know, that little voice that's trying to keep us stuck is like, it's not telling the truth. right? Like, so when we're experiencing fear and doubt, it's just a normal human mechanism, and it has nothing to do with our capability or our ability to do the thing. Right. But we tend to listen to it, right? We're like, oh, no, can't do that.
Well, yeah, it's almost like
because when you start something new, your brain will throw at you.
Your brain is bullshit most of the time.
Yeah, your brain will throw at you like 15 reasons.
Yeah,
exactly. Exactly.
You know,
right. And so learning that we don't actually have to listen is, it's important.
It's big. And the thing too is that what I learned when I finally got sober at 40 is I can't love anybody else or accomplish anything until I love myself and appreciate myself. And that's why I had to do so much work. And I think a lot of women, that stops them too. You know, they have a desire to do something, and then that negativity voice comes in with the, oh, you can't do that, you're not smart enough, you don't have the time, that kind of thing. Do you believe that you really have to love yourself first, which is hard for some women?
100%. 100%. And again, you know, we live in a culture that is telling us always as women, we're not enough, right? You need, you know, this makeup, you need this cream, you need to do this exercise. Like we're always like, we're so focused on like the physical aspects of our bodies that we're actually missing the really important thing. And that's what's inside of us. Right. Exactly. And when we reach this point of our lives, like in midlife, we're supposed to, like, we've done everything for everyone outside of ourselves. This chapter is all about us. And this chapter is us tuning into us, because that's where the gifts lie. Right. Exactly. And when we are, you know, honoring what's important to us and sharing our gifts, we are creating what I call our kick-ass next chapter.
Exactly. And the sad thing is sometimes all of that is buried under all of this false beliefs that you were taught as a child, or things that traumatic that might have happened to you when you were younger. And it's really hard to get through that. But I think I remember the affirmations were a big thing when I first got sober. And they said, now we want you to look in the mirror and say, I love you. I could not do that. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't look myself in the face and say, I love you. So what I started to do was say, I like you. I like you. Yeah. And I did that for a long time. So, you know, it's a process. It's a process. You can't just wake up one morning and decide, especially if you're being held back by a man in an abusive marriage, things like that. I think that's a big problem even today. Hasn't changed. I mean, I don't know what your views are on that, but I just feel that women are still not given as not equal recognition as the husband. Do you have any thoughts on that? You were married, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is so true. Yes, I was married. Yeah. And I'm in another relationship now. But, you know, here's the thing. People can't see you until you can see yourself.
That's right.
And so, so, I mean, the first step is to ask yourself, like, why am I settling for this? Like, what about me, you know, is putting myself in this situation?
Exactly.
Because everything starts with us.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
And I in my book, I talk about the one guy that I married twice. I don't know if you're old enough to remember Elizabeth Taylor, but she married Richard Burton 3 times, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I kind of did that. I married him twice. There's good reason why I did it and bad reasons why I did it. But for 7 years of him cheating on me and I'm sorry, it'll never happen again, and the humiliation and the lack of responsibility, et cetera, when I finally reached my breaking point, I said that to myself. When he was calling me, wanting to come back, I said to myself, Marie, you can't love him if you don't love yourself. And you obviously don't love yourself because you're putting up with this behavior that is not respectful, that you do not deserve. And that, even though I didn't sober yet, at least I started to wake up. Do you know what I'm saying? I woke up. And that was a big step. And I think women need to really go deep. You have to go deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the journey inside us is not always an easy one because sometimes we have to face things about ourselves that are difficult. But again, you know, as we unpack these things and we become more of who we truly are, like inside every one of us is a being who is whole and worthy and valuable and so incredibly powerful. And then on top of it, there's all this stuff, like you said, all of these messages and things that we've been cultured that are kind of built on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
And this, you know, I call this chapter of our lives actually the unlearning, because this is where we unlearn so many ways of being, like how we show up in the world, right? To get back to the truth of who we are underneath it all.
And
that's where we find our gifts. That's where we find the answers.
We have to unlearn. This is true. So you have been taught, not you, but a woman that has been taught that she is not important, and she either has to stay home and support the family or get married and have children. That was my situation. You get that, you believe that. And I always wanted to be a teacher. And I went to college when I was 28. I had a 3 and a 4-year-old, no child support. And I was able to get 2 years in. And at 40, I got my bachelor's degree. Now that took grit, resilience, persistence, and it took a while, but I did it. Why? Because I wanted to do that. Yeah. So it doesn't matter how long it takes you to get there. It's a journey. It's a journey, right? No,
you know, I always say, I mean, everything, like great things are achieved by taking tiny steps. Right. And so we tend to have an all or nothing mentality where we're like, you know, we must be 100% over here or we're not doing it. When the reality is any big change happens tiny step by tiny step by tiny step.
Yeah.
And so I always challenge the women in my community to say, like, what is the tiniest step that I can take today in the direction that I want to go? Right. And then, you know, the beauty of tiny steps is one day, like, first of all, you're kind of hacking that mechanism in your brain that wants you to freak out every time you take a new step, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're taking tiny steps. So it's like you take this tiny steps and then your brain goes, okay, wait, it was just a tiny step. Nobody freaked out. We're all good. Right. And then you take another tiny step and it's the same thing. Whereas if you made a big leap, your brain would be like, no, and throw at you 25 reasons why you shouldn't be doing it.
Right.
But the beauty of tiny steps is that one day you take these tiny steps, and then one day you look back and you're like, wow, look how far I've come. Because time is going by anyway, right? And if you can just find the tiny steps to take and just make that one step today, like I always have one thing on my to-do list that's me, like, what can I do today that's going to take me a step forward to where I want to go? Right. And I always make sure that one thing gets done. So like, you know, and then, like I said, you look back and, you know, a year later, you're like, I've taken 365 tiny steps that have added up to several giant leaps.
When you talked about the orange, eating an orange, I thought right away, well, that's mindfulness, which is something that is a good technique also.
Right.
I have one of my grandsons is on the spectrum, as they call it, but he has made such gains because he did meditation and mindfulness, and it took him a few years, but he said, man, I'm going off all my medications, and he doesn't take any medication, and he's in theater school.
That's amazing.
Awesome. But he practices that,
amazing.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, one of the first things that I tell anybody who enters the community and is kind of looking for that next step is, first of all, if you've been disconnected from yourself for 20, 30, 40 years, you have to start reconnecting. And just like you would with any relationship that you're building with somebody else, you have to spend time with yourself. So there's 3 things I recommend, like spending time in silence, stillness, and solitude, or any combination of those 3 things. Right. Yes. So when you can like sit by yourself, you know, with your cup of coffee in the morning, even it's for 5 minutes before the house wakes up, and just ask yourself, like, what do I want? What do I need? How do I feel today? and start building that relationship with yourself. Because the more you build that relationship with yourself, the more you'll know who you are, what you want, what brings you joy. Right. And,
Right.
you know, like in the culture that we live in today, sitting without your phone or watching TV or something like that is a bit of a novelty. But if you can, you know, go for a walk in nature, even if it's only for 5 or 10 minutes, or, you know, just being silent, being in your own head for a minute,
Right.
you'll start to hear things that you've never heard before.
Right. What's your
And
second?
then I encourage everybody to, is to write it down, like get a journal. And even if it doesn't quite make sense to you, just put it on paper, like give it a place to live that's not in your head. Because like most of us, I don't know about you, but my head, it's pretty busy up there. There's a lot going on, right? But sometimes, you know, you can write something in your journal and you come back to it later and you're like, oh, I understand what that means now. It didn't make sense to me at the time, but I get it. And you're building, you're just creating this relationship like with your inner voice. And you start, the more attention you pay, the more it starts to talk to you. Because when we ignore ourselves, our intuition, our inner voice just says, okay, she's not listening and I'm going to stop talking now because I'm tired. Right. But you're building that relationship. And the more you start listening, the more you will hear.
Okay.
And that connection part is like so critically important for all of us because we live in incredibly disconnected lives. Well, I mean, we're more connected than ever and more disconnected than ever at the same time.
Right. And I think what you said about in the morning, you know, sometimes, especially women with children or husbands or, you know, trying to do a lot of things, they just wake up and they go jump right into their day instead of taking that minute to just be. You know, like I always say, you know, I was always a doer, do. And now I have to learn how to just be.
Yeah, aren't we all?
And meditation is like silent meditation is one of the hardest things for me to do. I do guided meditation quite well. If someone's speaking, I can, you know, do that. Silence, that mind is like, just, right? But I'm working on it. And my minister who does meditation with us once a week, he said, you're going to have thoughts. It's okay. Just notice them and let them go by.
Exactly.
You know? So even at this stage in life where I've done all this work, it's still more work I can do. And I don't think you're ever going to reach that end. And that's good. It's a good thing.
No, that's a great thing in my mind.
Jennifer, what kind of things do you write on your blog? You have a blog.
So the blog really is all about tips, strategies, insights, all about how we connect better with ourselves, how we can, you know, get unstuck, like find that thing that, you know, brings us joy, like create that next chapter that we're truly passionate and excited about. So it's all centered on, you know, all of my studies in spirituality, in mindset, and all of that kind of stuff about just like, how do we, because anything is possible if we have the right tools and strategies. And so what I'm sharing is the tools and strategies to create that life that we want to create.
Did you ever think of turning those blogs into a book?
Oh, there's a book in the works. Yes.
Okay. All right.
There is.
Because
there is a book in the works as we speak.
Good. All right. There's a thing called Bella on Amazon Kindle. Do you know about Bella? A lot of people, it's fairly new.
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I like about it is, this is after I wrote my first book. You can post one episode or one chapter or one story at a time. And then people that have Kindle Unlimited, okay, they can read that story.
Yes, I have heard of this.
And they can accumulate points. They have to spend so many points to read your story, but those points get converted into money for you. And I wrote a few, and my royalty checks were getting bigger from them than the book. So you could turn your blogs into Bella chapters. Yeah. There's a lot of things out there that are free. And it's good. I like to throw that into the podcast because we have a lot of women that would like to write a book and don't know where to start, things like that. And And I tell them I self-published, I'm marketing myself, you know, and did I know how to do that? No, I had to teach myself. You know, I had to teach myself.
Love
So
that. Love
it's
that.
there. Yeah, I hope you do that.
Yeah.
When do you see
Yeah.
this book coming out? Do you think soon?
Hopefully next year. Yeah,
Okay.
I've committed a good chunk of time, like over the fall and winter,
Hmm.
to really sit down. Like I have pages and pages and pages of notes and ideas.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's literally just taking the time then to sit down and pull it
Hmm.
all together. So I'm hoping that I can have it finished by like maybe like March.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and then we'll see
That's
where it
awesome. Do
goes
you have a
from there.
title, working title? One that you're playing
I
with?
don't yet. I actually have probably about 10 working titles.
Yeah, I do that. I start off
It
and
will
it
it
gets
will
changed. Yeah, yeah. It gets
yeah.
changed. So
I
your
mean, it will be
podcast,
called
oh,
it
go
will
ahead.
be called sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No,
What
I
do
was
we
just going to
call?
say the book will be called Old Chicks Know Shit.
Oh, good.
And there will be some tagline, so we'll see. We'll see.
Like a
I've got, like I said, I've
subtitle.
got pages of them.
Yeah. Oh, it's just the next step, like you
Mhm.
said, right? The next step that is yours, I think. So your podcast is called
Right.
uh, the same
Exactly.
thing, right? Old Chicks Know Shit. Your podcast,
Yep.
right? Well, I hope you
Correct.
ask me to be on. I'd love to be on your podcast. You have an opening. How often
Yes,
do
we'll
you
have to
do
do
them?
that. Yes.
How often do you?
It's a weekly podcast.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, we'll look at our calendars. You'll have to get in touch with me. You have all my information, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
We'll make that happen. Yeah.
I think that'd be great. Well, it was wonderful talking to you, Jennifer, and there's a lot more we can talk about. Um, so we'll have to do this again. And like I said,
Yes,
I
we
could be a
will.
guest on your podcast, so that'd be wonderful. So thank you very, very much for coming
Yes,
today. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
I did. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm sure we'll see you soon. Thanks
All
again.
right.